Welcome everybody to the first joint webinar between amazee.io and Pronovix. Pronofix, I should pronounce it so that I don't get in trouble with my colleagues. Today we're going to have kind of an introduction about why Pronovix started working with amazee.io and what that has enabled us to do for our developer portal service. It's the way we thought about this when we decided to do this webinar was, just give a little bit of a view behind the scenes on how we deliver our DevPortal as a service for Pronovix customers, but also as an opportunity for people in the maybe wider Drupal community to learn like how they could pull off something similar if they would want to do something else as a service in their very specific niche, how that would be possible and how they would be able to use amazee for that. So that's kind of like the objective today, and to give you an idea of how all of that hosting stack works for our service. So we're going to have three presenters. We're going to have Bastian from amazee.io, who's going to be who's going to do the last segments on some of the inner workings of the amazee platform and Lagoon. He's also platform lead and a partner at amazee.io. I'll kick things off in a moment, but then we also have Jan Maschat, who's a senior systems engineer at Pronovix, who can explain a little bit more about why we're what's amazee.io enables us to do, and why we've chosen amazee.io as our primary hosting partner. But first, I want to talk a little bit of an introduction to why what are we trying to do, and why does this matter? And actually, let me turn on my camera for you. Pronovix as a team is now about 15 years old, and we started our life as a Drupal agency. We were Drupal engineers in our first 10 years, and basically we were doing a bit of everything in Drupal, and mostly when people had technical problems, we would jump in and help them to resolve them. But then after a while, as a consultancy, there's that pull for how would it be if we would be able to build a product and to deliver a product for the markets? How could we change things? And one of the key things for me was that as you're building custom things all the time for customers, every single project is new, and every single time you're basically learning the domain in which you're operating, the business domain in which you're operating from scratch. And that's not always a really good thing, because even though that you might be an expert at the technology, you might not fully understand what the customer really needs, and you might be building what customers asking you to build rather than trying to figure out together what is actually going to solve their problems. And so this is where this is how we started our journey in becoming a developer portal company. And first, that was just building developer portals same way as we used to do Drupal projects, as one-off projects. But then as we went along, and as we got to know more and more about the space, and we worked with more customers, we started looking for a different engagement model where we would be able to deliver developer portals as a service, where the customer did not have to deal with a hosting partner, a maintenance partner, some way of supporting things, a lot of headaches doing security updates on their own, and then the development partner, but where basically we could take all of that in one and be like a single stop shop for our customers. And the way that practically works on top of Drupal is that we can deliver a DevPortal as a service, which is open source under the hood. So basically, if a customer, as long as a customer does not want to own the portal, they can just leave it in our hands, and we can maintain it for them. But then as soon as they want to, they can take over control, So you get all the good things of open source without the headaches of open source. That's kind of like the idea. And that's a very short, like how the journey started and what we were trying to do. But maybe first a few words about Pronovix. So Pronovix, if you go looking today for developer portals, if you Google developer portals, very big chance that you'll end up on one of our articles. We've been doing, basically, we just doubled down, and for the last 5 years, that's the only thing that we've been doing. And we've maniacally focused on becoming, like deep research leaders in the space, so that we can help our customers as much as possible in this very fast evolving and sometimes complex area of technology. We've done a bunch of things to support that. One of our claims to fame is that we organize the DevPortal Awards, which is an award where we celebrate the best developer portals in the world. We have, I don't know how many Fortune 500 companies participated in that, but basically we have several large brands and also some really fast-moving, very ambitious startups and scale-ups that are participating to kind of like create a new benchmark every year for what would be like a really great developer portal experience and what would be a good API documentation experience, for the API community. We also run the API Docs community events, which is again a place where we learn together with our customers and the wider community about API documentation and developer portals. And the API Resilience podcast, that's kind of like, we've joked that this should be maybe the API philosophy podcast, because we talk about kind of like what is the business philosophy for APIs and what is the best path to value, both for internal and external developer portals, with stories from people from around the community that come and explain how they're using APIs to create value for their businesses and how that can be framed in a bigger purpose of APIs, even for society as a whole and the business community as a whole. I think our key thing is that we don't want to be a project company anymore. We've done that for a very long time. For 10 years, that's what we did. We just delivered. We did RFPs. We did quotes. We delivered projects exactly as the customers requesting it. And then we had to go and look for new customers and new projects. And this, I don't know if you've been in this space, this gets tiring very, very fast. It's not really a good way of being, because you can't really help your customers. Like you can help them with the technology, but you can't really commit to their ultimate success with your technology. And this is what we wanted to do as a DevPortal, as a service company, is to create these decades-long relationships, like do things differently so that we can deliver developer portals and then help support our customers as we learn more and as they learn more in creating a meaningful API program. And that means that we go on a long journey with our customers that starts with like our Geographic developer portal product that gets extended in a lot of cases, and then there's a whole long journey that we try to run through together with our customers. But because of the open source angle, it's not a journey of coercion. So like customers are not bound to us. They're free to leave. And I think that makes our relationships even more valuable together with our customers. A really important piece of this is how we host and support and do maintenance for our customers. Because like in the DevPortal space, there was this thing where organizations would first have to find a company to build and then a company to host their developer portal. So what a couple of years ago, we decided to try to bring all of that under one flag so that a customer would only need to have one relationship with us. And then they would be able to get hosting support, maintenance, product updates, further UX services, like everything in one place, so that they wouldn't have to deal with all these different separate relationships for each of which they would have to go through procurement with. One of the things that we found that was actually really important for a lot of our customers was that they needed to be able to be geographically where they had to be. So sometimes for data residency reasons, they needed to be in the European Union. Sometimes they might have to be in a very specific country. Sometimes they need to be in the US. Depending on the customer, this would change, especially if you're working with enterprise companies, this is important. And then also customers would be very peculiar about the cloud environments that they would be hosted on. Our preferred cloud environment is Google Cloud, but some of our customers really don't want to be on Google Cloud because they see Google as a competitor and might for some business reasons have decided that they don't want to be on Google Cloud. Or some customers really don't want to be on Amazon because Amazon is a competitor, and stuff like this happens quite often. And so we needed a solution that would be allowing us to be wherever we needed to be, both in terms of cloud and in terms of geographical reach. Amazee.io happened to be a company that actually enabled that. And that was we've gone a long journey. We've been working for quite a long time with Amazee, yeah, it's been a really fruitful partnership that has enabled us to be very adaptive and very able to help our customers however they needed to be helped. And yeah, so that's why we decided to do this webinar together with them. Next, I want to give the words to Jan Machat, who's going to talk a little bit about the possibilities that amazee.io gives us in terms of tailoring our WebOps workflow. Jan, take it away.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jan, and I will speak a bit about how we've tailored our WebOps workflow to work with Amazee's infrastructure. And I'm going to get a bit technical. So a lot of the other Drupal hosting platforms have predefined branches and environments in their deployment workflow. Amazee doesn't have this, so we had to sort of create our own workflow. And this was one of the initial workflows we came up with. So I'm just going to quickly go through this. So we have an on-prem server where we run our own Git server in Gerrit, and we have Jenkins doing the CI/CD. And we have developers who are pushing commits that need to be GPG signed. And the senior developers also have their private GPG keys on a hardware token. And those commits are used to create change requests, or in other systems, they're called pull requests or merge requests, where we run some tests like integration tests, unit tests, static code analysis, things like that. And we require a peer review and approval from another developer. And once that's done, then the change request can be merged into the master branch, which automatically gets deployed to the Amazee's environment. So as you can see, all of our branches here are tied to Amazee environments. and that's Jenkins basically pushing those, triggering those deployments into those environments. Once the changes in the master branch, the developers or PMs usually review the work, and if everything is working as expected, then it gets pushed further into the accept branch, where the customer can conduct UAT. From the accept branch, if it's approved by the customer, it goes to the pre-prod, where it does a sanity check on the deployment into the pre-prod environment, and from there it gets pushed into production. And what happens a lot of times is that things get stuck in the accept branch because the customer needs more time to review the changes. Sometimes they have additional changes on top of the ones that have been deployed that they would like to see included. So things can be in accept for a couple of days, couple of weeks. And during that time, security updates can come out for Drupal and the contrib modules, where we then need to cherry pick in order to basically bypass accept and push things directly into pre-prod. And we found that the longer time that passes by, the more difficult that gets, and also we cannot really develop if there is a larger phase of development happening in the accept branch. Then it's difficult to push smaller fixes directly into pre-prod. And so we've created a new multi-phase workflow where you can see two tracks. Basically, the top track is what has been deployed into production. So as you can see, there's the current branch and the pre-prod, and those are basically in sync with what's in production, which is V1. And then there is a second track, which is V2, and that's basically a new phase of development. And this allows us to basically have multiple weeks or months spent on a next phase without hindering the deployment to the what's currently in production. And yeah, as I mentioned, the developers are required to use GPG signed commits and pushes. And basically, we don't allow merging anything into master that does not go through a change request. So we try to secure the pipeline in that way. And also all the access to the amazee cluster is done via SSH, where the private keys are stored on the hardware USB devices. Yeah, and I think that pretty much covers what I wanted to say.
Bastian? Also, if anybody has any questions, we have there's the comments. If you look on the top right corner, there's a text balloon that you can leave a comment with a question. We'll have a little bit of time at the end of the webinar to answer questions or to have a short discussion. Bastian, take it away.
Yes, thank you. Also from my side, welcome to our webinar. I'm talking a little bit about the concepts we already heard from Christoph and Jan, and the first thing I want to talk about is the efficiency through standardization, because Pronovix is able to standardize on one platform and one workflow, and that helps a lot to improve the speed of delivery of the platform. Of the platform basically. So to shortly give a little bit an overview, we heard Lagoon already. Lagoon is amazee.io's application delivery platform. It's fully open source, and the only requirement you need is basically a Kubernetes platform. This can be managed, this can be done in-house, doesn't matter. As soon as there is a Kubernetes API, we can talk to it. We pride ourselves by being cloud agnostic. I say cloud agnostic very specifically and not multi-cloud, because multi-cloud always goes with the feeling that infrastructure is always running on several providers. Where cloud agnostic means we support the big three managed cloud providers, which is Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, and Azure. And we also support on-premise installations. I'll dive into that in a little bit. The focus of Lagoon is deploying web applications, but really you can, whatever you are able to deploy in a containerized fashion, it will be possible to run it and deploy it with Lagoon. There are already a lot of templates. We grew out of the Drupal universe. That's why we're very good at like supporting and knowing what Drupal needs to scale even to very big traffic patterns. We also have a lot of Laravel, Node.js, and WordPress things running currently. So to go a little bit deeper into the Lagoon overview, Lagoon is GitOps by heart. So everything, the whole infrastructure you need to run your code, your application is defined in Git. So if you need an additional database, you define it in your Docker Compose YAML and you throw it against Lagoon, and Lagoon will know that you need another database and will provision that for you. Lagoon also, with Kubernetes, we finally reached a point where we can say auto-scaling is at a point where we as a platform provider are very, very good at like tackling high traffic events or like load spikes that come up. Lagoon and also Kubernetes have a lot of self-healing capabilities, which we leverage, and we also auto-scale the entire infrastructure for high load scenarios, or also during the week, where basically over the weekend there is not a lot of traffic, so the infrastructure scales down. And when on Monday a lot of people start to work on the applications that are hosted with us, we start to scale up everything. This happens completely automatic, so there's not a lot we need to do on our end. But it was quite a journey to get there from like the first iteration of hosting we had. Lagoon itself is very developer centric. So as said, everything is GitOps, everything is also API first. So if you want to use an external tool that basically triggers deployments, you can do that. We have a GraphQL API where you can do nearly everything that you can do through the UI or through the CLI already. Everything is fully automated and scriptable, so like nearly every part of a deployment of a rollout can be scripted. You can add and hook into basically deployment tasks, or you can have other systems being informed that the deployment has finished and things like that. And this also makes it really great to work with integrations into other services. As you heard, Pronovix is basically using Jenkins to run a lot of tests before they actually tell Lagoon to deploy something. So this is a very important thing to us, to just not stand in the way of the developers. We try to see what the developers need and give a workflow that works for nearly every case that we find out there. I say nearly, there is not a week that goes by when somebody doesn't come and has an idea how their workflow should work. And by now, I'm pretty certain we can basically work with every workflow that's going to be thrown at us. Going a little bit deeper into our offering, we have two dedicated offerings, or two offerings. One is the cloud, and Christoph already mentioned that in the beginning. We have a lot of customers that are very particular where their data needs to be. We have GDPR, we have other data privacy acts that are in play here, and we are also very aware that the data sometimes cannot leave a certain region or country. When we started a few years ago with amazee.io, the biggest thing is we needed hosting in Switzerland because we had customers that needed hosting in Switzerland, and AWS wasn't in Switzerland and Google Cloud was also not in Switzerland. So we started to basically build our own hosting because we wanted to have everything hosted out of that country because the traffic was high, and we also wanted to get down to like the lowest latency we could. This was really the start of amazee.io, and from there we took that idea that we can basically start hosting nearly everywhere, and we're basically pushing that to extremes. So currently the big zones that we have is Switzerland, Germany, the UK, the US, Finland, and Australia. I think New Zealand is missing on here. I just forgot about New Zealand there. And if you have customers that either have economy of scale, so governments, big international enterprises that come with a big volume of sites, we can also have a dedicated cluster that just runs their workloads and their applications. We also have customers that need to go to dedicated clusters because of regulatory boundaries where they basically are not allowed to run on a shared infrastructure. As earlier explained, we support the big cloud providers, and we also support on-premise installations. So we have a few customers from banking and the insurance sector, and those basically have strong regulations that say, okay, data needs to stay on our premises, and there we go in and start to run Lagoon as their own cluster in their own data center. So a few key points, our key features that we support Pronovix with, and also in the end also their customers. So we are really having a lot of possibilities to help our customers and tailor our offering to our customers' needs. So we run technical account management, which is basically access to one of our senior engineers that helps delivery of applications, that helps architecting things, that looks into like bigger issues or optimizing workloads. So if we see that something comes up, we basically go in and have a chat with Pronovix and see how we can make the application run more in a more optimal fashion. We also have 24/7 on call. This doesn't come to a surprise. It's a 24/7 business, that web hosting, and we reach that by having a global team. So we focus on three areas, which is EMEA, APAC, and the Americas, and our operations team is basically handing over work and the operations every 8 hours to the next team. We also have professional services. This is something when we have customers that come in and have very detailed requirements, that might be security requirements, or this might be basically adding the application to an already existing stack, like to have a project around that. That's what the professional services team is for. And we also have support that is done mostly via chat, because we feel this is the best way of having quick turnaround ways to solve issues, and not send a mail back and forth and wait a few hours until the ticket gets picked up. Another thing, and you probably already saw that when we were looking at the workflow. So the workflow of how you deploy applications is really important to us. Like, there is no one-size-fits-all workflow. Some companies or some teams decide that basically branches and merge requests are their way to go, and we are totally fine with that. Some companies say, hey, we want to have features, basically feature branches, and they only have one branch. So we try to be able to be that flexible to have all those environments and those workflows possible for them. It's very important for when I say, for example, we also support pull request environments. So basically, when you open a pull request, what Lagoon can do for you is it creates an environment, it starts everything that you need, and then it basically gives you the URL where you can test. And as soon as you merge that into your branch, and you, for example, in your production or main branch, like the environment is being torn down. What we also provide is actively maintained base images. We also support our customer base that they can basically build up on top of those containers. They can also run custom containers, but there's usually the discussion about security. But in general, we have a breadth of a lot of containers that help you run your applications, so you can always build on top of them. And we are also very open to security audits. We run a few security audits with our customers, so the whole platform is audited in a regular fashion. And also, when you have a lot of industry verticals that have regulations, then it's very, very good if you can provide that openness and that level of openness with the end customer to go into those details. With that, I'm already coming to the end of my part, and I think we can open the round for some questions if there are.
And let me also turn on my camera.
Yeah, and I successfully unshared my screen without leaving the meeting.
Wow.
which happened earlier today.
Stay away from the big red cross.
Yeah. Cool. Any questions?
While we're waiting for some questions from the participants, we prepared a couple, so maybe we can start off with those. I think I'll open up with one for you, Bastian. So one of the things I've seen in the Drupal community happen a lot is this, oh, that looks easy, I can do that, and then and then people go and like build their own hosting solution, and I think to some extent that's kind of what you've done. We've heard the reason why you've done it, but maybe you can explore that a little bit more, like how did you end up choosing to do that? Because when we looked at this, we were like, or I personally, I was like, I don't want to be a hosting company. It's just not, it's not for us. It's going to be a distraction. But what was the reason for amazee to go that route?
That's a very good question. So, as already mentioned a little bit, like in the beginning, we basically needed hosting in Switzerland, and we had very clear ways what we needed, and we thought we know what we need, and this was usually very like the bleeding edge technology that we wanted to try out. So that brought us together with a few partners that basically came in and say, hey, we can help you there. It's also important to know Lagoon is probably like the third iteration of the whole hosting stack as we see it now. So it evolved quite a bit, and it was also thanks to our customers that always pushed us to either like having new technologies or needing a lot of flexibility. As said, like country-specific things is something that we dove into quite at the beginning. Then at some point, the Drupal universe was doing a lot of decoupled Drupal. And we had one of our biggest customers that came up with like, hey, so I'll decouple my Drupal, can you host it? And we were like, well, we'll figure out. And that was really like the starting point where we started to use Kubernetes, because before everything was plain old web hosting, and you had your Linux web server and you slapped your application on top of it. But at some point, when you had applications that get a lot more complex than what you used to, we basically started that. When I look at the entire, like, the Drupal universe, and seeing that a lot of agencies still run their own hosting, some have very good reasons to do so, but what I usually say is, like, standardize whatever you can. So like starting the own web hosting, you really need a need for it. And and you also need to be in there for the long run. It's not just something you build on week one and then it's there. It needs like a security team that reviews security incidents. It needs maintenance. It needs like having everything updated and so on. Like, it's a big undertaking. So my philosophy behind this is, like, standardize as much as possible and find a platform that works for you, that gives you all the features you need, and then double down on it, basically. And try to, like, focus on what, like, for example, Pronovix focuses on the DevPortals, and that's our goal, basically, that you can focus on your core value and your core product, and we focus on the platform. So that's mainly it.
And I think one of the key values is the flexibility, right? Amazee is not a black box. It's even open source, so you can see what's in the box. Yeah. And then it's also it's like a Lego box, and you can still go and build stuff with it. And I think maybe Jan or Bastian, if you have something to say about that.
Yeah, it's also important to know. So in the beginning, when we started like open sourcing everything, so people were basically telling us, like, why do you do that? So suddenly everybody can run a hosting company. And in the beginning, it was a lot of like security related things, where we had customers asking us, like, how is your configuration of Varnish done? How is this? How's that? And now we're basically just giving it, because it's not only the code that runs the platform, it's also the team behind the platform that runs it.
So, but that flexibility, and that's maybe a question for Jan, is I remember going through some exercises, like looking at, like, okay, some partners had asked us, like, okay, actually, could you work with other hosting partners that we already have a partnership with? And I was like, okay. So then I went back to the technical team, to our developer team, and like they were very forthcoming, and we did a lot of research. But in the end, it basically, we ended up like, no, this is actually going to cost us much more efforts, and there's no positive value here. It's just negative value. Can you talk maybe a little bit about that positive value, that extra value that amazee gives us that we weren't able to get with other partners, and maybe some practical places where that flexibility that we talked about, like you showed 2 different workflows, just the ability to switch workflows based on what we're learning. I think that's already a lot of value. But do you have like a practical example, or a couple of practical examples of places where this enabled us to do things that otherwise wouldn't have been possible?
Yeah, I think one of the main aspects is the containerized services, which allows us to basically add services that run next to Drupal. For example, we have, for one customer, we have a PDF generation service that's running in a container, and basically the other major Drupal hosting platforms would not allow us to run another, a non-PHP service, for example. So I think that's one of the main aspects. And yeah, as you said, the flexibility of the other major Drupal hosting platforms have a predefined workflow, and basically you need to mold your way of thinking and to work with that and adjust to their processes.
I guess sometimes having a hard default can be liberating because it removes some cognitive load.
Indeed.
At the same time, like at the same time, when you can, like, when you really go deep, when you become like us, like x ... as a service in the space, you need that flexibility, I think, because just a black box. Well, having that possibility to adjust the workflows based on what you're learning, I think, is essential. Have you seen, Bastian, have you seen customers that go like, well, actually, just give me a default, and then after a while are like, well, oh, I really need this one feature?
Yeah, I mean, we had a lot. It's also important to know, like, we didn't support all the features we have today from day one. Like, it's basically a work in progress. But yeah, we had, or like I worked together with customers. They came on and they were like, okay, we basically have 3 branches and we merge between them. And after a while, and it also is a lot of technical fitness of the team that runs, like, or that develops the code, and suddenly the developers come around with like, hey, can you do blue-green deployments or active standby, as we call them. And then, like, for example, the active standby is a really interesting topic because we had a lot of big sites that said, hey, we need to have downtime-free deployments, but we need to stage the new content before. And everybody knowing Drupal knows this is a lot of pain. So what we started to build, and it's probably the feature that took the longest, because you first needed to figure out, what does the customer really, like, what does the customer of the project need? Because, like, it's easy to say active standby deployments, we need that, end of the story, but it's also hard to figure out, like, what's the process on the developer's end to run that. Another thing, and that's one of the features Pronovix uses, is basically the promotion workflow. So basically you have your pre-production environment, and then you come up and say, okay, pre-production is now stable, we have everything that the release needs, and then you promote exactly the same image. You don't even build the Docker image anymore, the container anymore. You basically use the same image and run it into production. So those things are powerful, and I'm inclined to look at the customer and look at the customer's fitness of the development team, and then find a workflow that usually works for them, and then grow them into the features they need down the road. Because yeah, as you said, it's liberating to have all the freedom, but it's also that pain sometimes because you have all the possibilities open.
And I think it's that, well, the partnership with amazee has been amazing. I think for us, it's that flexibility. It's the same attitude that we try to have with our customers, which is, okay, we're going to help you with defaults, but we're not going to just pin you down in whatever we thought was going to be right for you. It's like this, like moving away from a paternalistic relationship with your customers to okay, let's talk let's be real. Some things are just really too hard and crazy, but let's actually work through this and figure out, like, actually this makes sense. Maybe we should be able to do this.
Yeah, and I mean,
it's really powerful.
It comes also sometimes to very, like as said, we have the standard base images, and you can do a lot with them, and then customers come on and say, I want to do XYZ, and we're not standing in the way, but like it's also important for every involved party to understand, like, as soon as you start to add your own things on top, you're responsible for that. That's really hard sometimes to draw the boundary.
I think that's the difficulty in this model, is where is the boundary? That's always boundary negotiation.
That's probably the weekly discussion in the technical account management team.
Yeah.
I see there is a question.
So do you have any tips for getting buy-in to build a dev portal? A lot, I think. So it depends a little bit on, is it an internal dev portal? Is it an external dev portal? What is the objective that you're trying to achieve? Externally, it's often much easier. Both. Okay. So external dev portal is easier because normally you can somehow come back to management with here's how this is going to have an impact on our ecosystems and how it's going to improve our business by extending our products or creating new products and making more money. Internally, it's often a little bit harder because it's often about just efficiency. But we see that in larger companies, the cost of, like, the opportunity for reusing code, for getting people to to work on top of a standardized platform and to start standardizing some of your capabilities in your organization, so that other people can build on top of that, are really powerful. So I think the key is, is it about buy-in from management, then it's about showing them the value of that. Also, being careful not to overpromise, because if you overpromise, then it's going to backfire at some point. So we've started doing this with customers, where we do a low-key experiment project that allows them to do some initial validation before we really dive deeper and go in full-on development mode with them. So I think that would be kind of like some of the things. And then the APIs are kind of like super hot right now, especially with COVID. It's like the whole tech scene has heated up. So it's kind of like the tsunami. So first the sea receded, and now the wave is here. And I think that's happening for all of IT, but in the API space, it's even more so, because when you can't meet people face to face, you need some sort of automation, and you can increase the rate of automation of the creation of new automation through APIs. By having APIs, you can accelerate that. So those are some tips. But if you want, we can talk a little bit deeper about it. With some, if I hear more of your story, I can tell you more specific ideas that you could use. Okay. Good.
Yeah, so great. So yeah, maybe a question, not sure, Christopher, Jan, if you want to go into that. Like, we pride ourselves by being cloud agnostic. Why is that important for you?
I think, Jan, you have a lot of these conversations with customers, right? So basically, yeah.
Well, go ahead.
Well, I want to hear your perspective also, but basically we get this all the time. Like, our customers, like, especially when you're dealing with enterprise, it's, some want to be on-prem, some want to be this cloud, that cloud. It is just like, especially now with the whole cloud wars that's been going on, what we see is that customers will have like a massive contract that they've committed to with one of the cloud providers, and now they need to use up the infrastructure. It doesn't always work because it's just one site Like for most customers, it doesn't make sense to have like a separate cluster on their own infrastructure. But that is like one of the key things, is the ability to be what is already pre-approved by the organization. And often security has like pre-approved specific organization. Jan, I don't know, what are the things that stand out for you?
Yeah, I think it's just great to be able to give customers a choice. You know, they can start out with a minimal package, and they can, you know, go all the way up to their own cluster if they want to have a dedicated cluster. Then that's also an option, and I think it's just great that we can offer that.
Also, this is transparent for us, right? It doesn't really matter for us what cloud it is, and that's super powerful.
Exactly. Our workflow
So
doesn't change. Our interfaces change. Processes stay the same.
We have one interface, which is Lagoon, and we work through that with wherever the customer needs to be, and that's super powerful.
Great, thank you. Yeah, it's also important to note, like it also keeps the product very flexible. So Lagoon in itself is multi-cloud, and I feel with, like, as you mentioned, Christoph, like the cloud wars, or basically like 3 providers being really big in the market, it also keeps the product much more flexible, that we don't start to build up on technology A that only one provider has, that we really try to leverage everything.
And it's yeah, I think for customers, we haven't had a customer that said like, okay, I want to start hosting my own stack now, or like, but basically this promise, it's you know, you don't have to own it as long as you don't want to. It goes the whole stack through, which is crazy. I think like the ability to say like, okay, I want my DevPortal and my hosting infrastructure on-prem now. Like, so if a customer would say, I want 100 DevPortals, and you know, I'm going to own this myself, that is a possibility. It hasn't happened yet, but
yeah. We have those discussions sometimes, where basically our customers' IT team already has a lot of knowledge how to run Kubernetes, and they're like, they look at Lagoon and say, oh well, that's, yeah, we can run that as on the side, that's no problem. And then they start to look into it more and more and see, wow, okay, we could standardize even more, because a lot of the deployment workflows of the world are basically Jenkins jobs currently. And they're like, we could standardize more and have a managed pipeline that will deliver the applications they need.
with an interface.
With an interface, yeah.
Yeah. That's super useful.
Great. Any other questions?
Any last comments from either of us?
I'm
We're
good.
good.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. This is fun.
Thanks.
Thank you. And then have a great afternoon.
Yeah, have a lovely rest of the day and rest of the week, and I hope to see you at one of our next webinars.
Have a good one. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.